I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Tonight's roll call: Calhoun.
Here.
Casagrande.
Here.
Wells.
Here.
Demott.
Here.
McClure.
Here.
Osenga.
Here.
Mayor Terry.
Yes.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is citizen comments on any subject except those items scheduled for public hearing. We have no public hearing items. Those who have signed in will be given the first opportunity to speak. Time is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, 36 minutes total time for this agenda item. And folks can state if they live inside or outside city limits. Madam Clerk?
Madam Mayor, we have Tim McDonald.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, Tim McDonald, Inside City Limits. Has anybody noticed an increase in traffic this summer? I have. It seems like, it's really hard to get off Nash Road sometimes. Just lines and lines, solid lines of cars, whether it's rush hour or not. There's such a thing in Seward. But it's too bad about the airport and the east runway. If the east runway was fixed, then we could use the west runway for a bypass to Port Avenue and the Railroad Harbor District. And a lot of traffic could be routed down there. I think, I know a lot of the trucks go at night to avoid the traffic, but there's still a lot in the day. Even the guys with towing their boats could use the bypass to avoid the general traffic, so we don't just have that solid 2-mile stack up of traffic coming into town. Everybody says that it can be fixed and stuff, but I don't believe that. A couple thousand feet of sheet pile, you might have to bring it up a foot or two, but the sheet pile, you can do anything. It goes way below the flood thing. It used to be $1,000 per pile. It's probably $5,000 or $10,000 now per pile. Each pile covers a foot, so yeah, you probably need 2,000 or maybe a little more. And you could redo that. I would think the Alaska Railroad would want to help with that, since a lot of the traffic and a lot of the buses are going to be coming from the cruise ships, since they're determined to bring the 1,200-foot cruise ships in, whether we like it or not, whether we're ready for it or not. I don't really think it's a good idea. I think we need to spread our capacity out, what we have at the moment, before we dump more on top of it. It's kind of ridiculous right now. You go downtown, there's not an area Sewardite in sight. It's just tourists and an occasional shop owner. Most of them are don't live in Seward either. So anyway, I'm in favor of doing something with that east runway, even if it costs us 10 or 20 million bucks. We're going to need it. If we're going to have an airport, a small plane airport. The other thing that concerns me is the utility. We've got to remember the decision is being made for many, many more people than the ones that just live in Seward. The utility goes out to Moose Pass, and if there's any question of a sale, everybody should get a vote that's a utility customer. Seward's a pretty inclusive little community with only 400 to 600 voters, and it's not really fair any other way. That's all I have to say tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else signed in?
No, ma'am.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Go ahead, Mr. Jaffa.
Bruce Jaffa, Outside City Limits. I'm sorry I didn't sign in, but I will take the opportunity to speak for the resolution regarding the ad hoc committee, Your Clean Energy. I should quote the number, but you know what it is. It will help in organizing and moving forward with the group activity that we have already started. I think we are building momentum. We may have another speaker for you tonight, but appreciate all the support that we're hearing from the community, from the council, from the administration, and we look forward to doing good things with that. I will say one thing. I've mentioned to you before that I serve on other boards. Moose Pass community has an issue. The Seward Highway is very critical to everyone. The city of Seward has an economic and interest both for freight, tourists, public safety. There's nothing that the Moose Pass community wants to do to interfere with the access or through flow of traffic. The important thing to remember is that Moose Pass was here before this road was here, and the people who live in Moose Pass often live there because of an ambiance, and that's what they're trying to protect. So if you see any kind of correspondence that you have questions about, feel free to bring those to the community. Our interests are closely tied to Seward's.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Yeah, hi, Dave Paperman, I live in the city limits. Growing up in New Jersey, one of the laws that I came to greatly appreciate in Seward and in Alaska is our no billboard law. And I just want to note, you probably have seen this as well, we are approaching election season. And I think the city code about planning is pretty clear that political signs are considered to be temporary signs. And there are pretty strict limits on signage for politicians in the community. I believe it's 4 square feet on a residential property and 16 square feet per sign in a commercial property. We're already seeing the multitude of the 40, or 20, 4 times 8 is 24, or 32 square foot signs around on buildings, freestanding and other places around the community. I have upset many friends of mine who are politicians when I refuse to help them put up the large signs which go against the code. So I would really like to see us do a better job as a community of enforcing the good code that we have and keep our community looking good and not have certain buildings that have 8 or 10 of these 32 square foot signs on them when the limit is supposed to be 1 16-foot sign. So thank you guys for doing that, and let's keep Seward beautiful.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak? Hearing and seeing none. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda and consent agenda, and I need a motion and a second.
I move for the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Are there any changes or additions? Madam Clerk, I think we're ready for a vote.
Voting on the approval of tonight's agenda and consent agenda, Osenga,
Yes.
Calhoun,
Yes.
Wells,
Yes.
Casagrande,
Yes.
Demas,
Yes.
McClure,
Yes.
Mayor Terry.
Yes.
Your agenda and consent agenda are approved. And approved on tonight's consent agenda, the introduction of ordinance 2022-009, amending Seward City Code, section 2.25.045, Finance Department. This ordinance will come for public hearing and enactment on July 25th. You have approved resolution 2022-082, authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Electric Power Systems Incorporated for engineering services for the design to upgrade the voltage and transformer capacity of Seward's Fort Raymond substation to 115 kilovolts in a not-to-exceed amount of $239,472, including a 20% contingency. You have approved action memorandum 2022-003, authorizing the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with Your Clean Energy to provide consulting services to the Heat Loop Ad Hoc Committee and provide services as authorized by the city manager as requested by the Ad Hoc Committee in an amount not to exceed $19,520. You have approved the June 27, 2022 City Council regular meeting minutes, and you have no objection to the renewal of liquor license number 4617, beverage dispensary for Chinook's Water Plant.
Great, thank you. Special orders, presentations, and reports. There are no proclamations and awards. Next is city manager's report, and that can be found starting on page 3 of the packet. City manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Something that I wanted to report is I had requested another extension of the heat loop project and was notified that the extension is now through the end of the year. They had been doing 90 days at a time, so I'll have the paperwork hopefully sometime this week, but they did give approval of it. As you know, we spent a lot of time and energy working on the jail funding issue, which I'm happy that the funding was increased to a better level. The next step is the contract, and Chief Nichols sent out an email to the other involved municipal jails, and no one has received their contract yet, which expires end of this month. And we have a great interest in reworking the contract, which the language states that we have that ability to do, and we're going to use that this year before it's signed. So none of us have received our contract, so we're keep working on that issue that goes hand in hand with the funding issue. That's all that I have other than the written report.
Great, thank you. Good comprehensive written report in the packet. I'm guessing there are probably questions for administration. Anyone want to kick it off?
I have one. I'm sure she's probably left the building, but we have a new Parks and Rec director. It'd be nice to have her introduced to the public, but I think
Yes.
she's gone.
She is gone. She had to leave this evening, but she will be back at the next meeting, and then, of course, we'll have her for the CIP. But she is here, and we're very thankful for that.
Because I've been getting questions about that. Things are looking better.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead.
Has the gardener begun?
Today.
So maybe say that in total, so we now have a gardener for the public spaces and
Yes.
flower beds in the city, and she started today.
Yes, she did. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to.
Go ahead.
I've been getting considerable calls about political signs, and I did call administration and ask, and I was wondering if you could just give a little rundown of, are we doing anything to keep people in compliance with code, or how our code reads? Could we have some kind of a comment on that?
Actually, because it involves elections, we work with the clerk's office, and the clerk sends out a notice, and I don't want to speak for you, so.
Yeah, I would put it back to community development. Political signs are considered temporary signs in code, but when the signs go up for any politician, unless it's a local municipal election sign, I really don't have any purview over it. It would just come down to the sign ordinance in code, so I'm not sure what we're doing.
Is there a way to post that section of the code on the website? And then also, do you have any contacts for like the LIO? Could
So-
we distribute it to the state of elections?
If I can,
or-
let me
Yeah.
share what I've experienced in prior years.
Yeah.
And that is because I have received complaints, not just starting this year, but in prior years, about political signs being put up or left up too long afterwards. I contacted the Division of Elections, and they said, file a complaint with the candidate's office. They will take the information, but you have to contact the candidate's office directly and file a complaint. Political signs outside of city limits fall under the purview of the Department of Transportation, so we have contact information for them as well. Complaints can be filed with them if it's, like on the street, it's on private property, it's on the roadside somewhere. I kind of feel like my hands are tied a little bit as far as the local political signs go.
Could we do some sort of press release or news release so we could distribute it, maybe provide that code to the Sewer Journal? And just kind of get that word out there, because I think people will definitely police themselves if we just getting that code out there. I don't know if anyone has any other ideas. Yep.
So in the past, community development has sent letters to those addresses. Okay,
Thanks.
that are not compliant.
We will follow up.
Go ahead.
It does seem, though, that if we emailed or contacted the candidate's office, I mean, why would they want to be running for a political position and breaking any codes whatsoever? That seems like a great step.
Any other questions or comments? I have something, I didn't want to wait till my comments, because I just want to make sure that we're all of the same vein. Just because we have a sister city in Japan, and we have a long-standing relationship with that country, I would like to send just a bereavement notice about the former Prime Minister's assassination, just from the city. If we could send a card or something, maybe to the consulate in Alaska. And then I don't know how appropriate it would be to send something to our contact in Oberhero and just say, our...
And Kashiro.
And Kashiro,
We can send one
yeah, our port
to
city
each of
and...
those locations.
That would be
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yep, on behalf of the council or the city.
And then I do have one more thing that's peripheral. Public notice for the Lowell Canyon and Low Point Road closures. That was great getting it out, and thank you for sending it again. And then if we could just, honestly send it one more time, because I think people forget. But I think it was very helpful to get that out. And I don't know if it could be bullet sent to, like that Low Point Community Council.
It's been sent
Okay,
there too.
great. Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Go ahead.
Can you just announce what the closures are for anybody that's listening?
I have it right here.
I want to do it
So-
quickly, go ahead.
So starting Tuesday, July 12th, so tomorrow through the 15th, in Lowell Canyon, west of the current tunnel and diversion dam, work session is delineated with cones and caution tape and a closed area during the construction efforts. And I'm less clear if that will actually impact the road.
It will.
It does, okay. And then continuing Saturday, July 16th to 20th, efforts will start in the overflow area by the bridge and the waterfall, and they will finish work during low tide times, and 4 hours to low tide, and finish each day 3 to 4 hours after low tide. And flaggers will control traffic during these intermittent delays of 3 to 15 minutes. Through traffic will still be 2 lanes, but we'll have slower speeds. Very light seismic work, and sensor cables will cross the road. So if we could just keep, especially for the businesses that have people traveling. Anything else? I took up a lot of time today, sorry. Go ahead.
I'd just like to say thank you to Public Works. The Lowell Point Road, after that first rain, was wild over the weekend, and I don't know what we're gonna do, but, even a couple hours after they graded, it was still really hard to drive. So, thank you for the efforts. Hopefully stay on top of that.
Any other comments? Thank you. Next is City Manager's Report, and that starts on page 20. Thank you for joining us today. I'll turn it over to you. Oh, City Attorney's Report. Yeah.
Hi, Sam Severin, City Attorney. Looking at my report, and I usually just read through this ahead of time and think of what things I'd like to talk about that would be interesting. As I frequently note, much of it is not particularly interesting, but makes the city run, helps the city run. But we were talking about code enforcement with the signs, and I know I haven't looked at the election sign code, so I'm not going to try to speak to that. But the third or fourth thing down in there is another code enforcement potential action. And over the last few months, there was another one about code enforcement pertaining to a couple of hotels and that's resolved now. And I bring that up in part because code enforcement with signs came up tonight, and that is, on any of these, when they are in general terms like that, we can talk about them in greater detail. With some of that code enforcement stuff, it's not like the personnel. It's probably, strictly speaking, not unlawful to probably talk about them. I don't like to, because a lot of times it might be a letter to somebody and they say, oh, well, I'll get in line with the code, I didn't realize. And if they're doing that, I don't see any reason to talk about it publicly just yet. So that's, but we can always talk about any of these. Stephen and Jeanette know this, I get pretty enthusiastic about code enforcement stuff. And not because I'm such a, I guess, maybe law and order guy, but because what happens with those is a property will be a problem for a number of years, and the city will write letters or do different things, but it just nothing, a lot of times nothing quite happens. And so I've got different tools, different ways of looking at it, potential court action, just different ways, a lot of solutions to bring to it, and I've been doing it for a long time. So I enjoy that. Hopefully we'll continue to see different types of code enforcement in the report, because that's usually mine, and I enjoy doing that. It can solve a problem that often isn't the most interesting thing, most financially big deal that we're involved in, but it can make a difference for a neighborhood. For example, if somebody's, got a property with a lot of junk cars they're not paying attention to, or that kind of thing. So it's an area where we can make a big difference by just diving in. So we'll see about election signs. I think public information is a good first start on that one. And then along with that, a minor offense fine schedule, and we're doing ongoing recodification work, and that minor offense fine schedule is a big picture step toward better ability to enforce the code. It just really streamlines things, allows for citations to be written to enforce a lot of the city codes that otherwise are sort of on the books, but what do we actually do with them? And getting that minor offense fine table is a big step in the right direction. So we were looking at ways to make it more flexible to update it as well, and we'll see where we come out on that. But and another one, the personnel stuff is always tough because it's written so that nobody can figure out what's going on. That's very much by design. But one of the things I thought was interesting in there is that we advised on a USERA issue, and that is when people leave city or government employment to, and maybe private employment, but I don't deal with it frequently, to go serve in the military, their position isn't necessarily held open for them, but for a period of years, depending on if certain conditions are met, they are entitled to have their position back if it exists still or can be deemed to exist reasonably similarly. And it's just an example of the kind of things that we navigate. And I'm familiar with it, I've dealt with it a number of times, but still have to go look it up every time. It's a big federal law, I have to kind of go back and figure out what it means and what it looks like. So that was just kind of a generally interesting aspect of the employment law that I could cover in kind of general terms. But otherwise, we're working away and talking with management frequently, and that's all I have. If anybody has any questions.
Are there any questions? Go ahead.
I did notice that you advised on the process for establishing and collecting assessments on property within a subdivision approved for development incentives. Are we getting our payments, and is everything going well there?
I'll tell you, maybe management can speak to that one a little bit more. That was Mr. Chandler, and I frankly haven't been involved in that, so I will try to speak off the cuff to that. But
Madam Mayor?
Go ahead.
To answer your question, yes, we're getting payments. Some of this is the form in which we need to proceed with the special assessment part with the borough that we need to do, and setting up subdivision agreements, and all of it related to the DRP program.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm glad to see that you're working with our folks that serve in the military, especially because it's hard for the city. I mean, I think that employees are in the driving position with filling vacant positions, so it's nice that we're working with our military folks and having that option for when they want to come back and work for the city, so thank you for working on that. Any other questions? Next is Borough Assembly report, and our Borough Assembly representative, Cindy Eklund, is here. Thank you, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry about being gone.
No.
Too serious. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Administration, and public. Might be a little long-winded tonight because they've been gone.
Buckle up.
All right. So, there are many items on the Kenai Peninsula Borough Assembly agendas. Typically, I report on items that could affect Seward or the area residents. But if you would like to discuss any other Assembly agenda items, past or present, then don't hesitate to contact me, 907-362-2276. So on Monday night's, a week ago, agenda, ordinance 2022-1905 was appropriating $20,000 from the general fund to cover unexpected election expenses. So there will be a public hearing on August 9th to cover that again and then enact it. And this is to raise election worker wages from $10 an hour to $20 an hour because we have to pay the same that the state does. And then there's a little extra money for some custodial work at an election site when the school isn't open yet. Ordinance 2022-25 is amending Kenai Peninsula Borough Code Chapter 21.50 relating to stop work orders and fine amounts in stipulated agreements, and the hearing will be on the 9th. The borough currently does not have a stop work order for things in the planning department, typically like when somebody is building in the setback and they get a call, or building outside of the borough or state codes. So this will amend the code to add a stop work order language and fine amounts commensurate with that cost and start solving some of the non-compliance issues. Currently, the fine is like $150, but there's multiple site visits and there's legal work and there's planning department work, and it just is not paying for all that time. But it also is an easier way than all that legal effort, but just say, hey, if you stop right now, we can figure it all out and go from there. The ordinance 2022-26, amending Kenai Peninsula Borough Chapters 7.20, 7.30, and 21.44, relating to marijuana establishments and processing applications for marijuana establishments, and the hearing will be on the 9th as well. So this is kind of a lengthy one, but I don't want to get it messed up. So there's been 6 years that we've had marijuana establishments in the borough, and it's pretty apparent that the Planning Commission review and comment is just a unnecessary additional regulatory step. The ordinance is going to remove the Planning Commission from the application process because we hear it, when I was on the Planning Commission, we heard the application and then we just said we forward it to the Assembly for their decision. The Planning Department still checks all the codes and makes sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and then the Assembly approves it and it goes on to the state. So this is just taking one of those monotonous steps out of the plan, but it will still be very well reviewed. Ordinance 2022-27 is amending Kenai Peninsula Borough 2125, and this is on some of the more contentious parts of the borough code. It's going to add a definition of aggrieved party and amend Kenai Peninsula Borough 2129 to remove the term impartial, to clarify the well monitoring timeline, and to define quarterly, and then add a definition sections. This isn't as big a deal over here on this side of the borough because we have so much gravel, but on the other side of the borough, material, sites, and conditional use permits are huge. And so the aggrieved party is going to reduce the number of people who can file an appeal. You have to be, have a very strong interest in what's happening. You can't just say, well, I disagree. It has to show that you are directly, negatively impacted by the decision. And the word impartial is proved very contentious at Planning Commission, and it is not used anywhere else in the code, so they're going to remove that. And quarterly, it's just never been defined what quarterly is, so they're going to have a timeline for that. And then they're going to put all those definitions in the section. And the last ordinance, I'm just going to briefly mention the ordinance number 2230, approving the Stephen Key, Alaska Sub-Block 8 Residential Waterfront Local Option Zoning District and amending Kenai Peninsula Borough 21.46.110. So when this came up, I thought, well, I don't know how many people in Seward know how these things happen, but this is property that is going to be, as Liz sent out on Facebook, the auction land sale, the live auction and online sale that's going to be on August 13th, and you need to pre-register online, and then you can bid on 18 different properties. And they're hoping to make like $1.7 million that's at fair market value, and last year these things went sky high. Yeah, they went really big, and they made a lot of money, and they're trying to make enough money to set money aside to pay for the land management department year after year after year. So, this ordinance, is of interest to people in our city and outside, because you can recommend property to be put in that land sale. And I talked to Marcus Mueller, our land management director. This borough still has 13,000 acres that we can get from the state and put in borough hands, and then the borough can sell. So this subdivision out here along the Kenai River, somebody said, hey, I'd like you to sell this property. So right now, currently, it's still in the state's hands, DNR's, and the borough's made a request to get it, and by August, it'll be in borough hands, and it'll go up for sale. And there is zoning in the borough. It's local option zoning. You have to have at least 12 lots, and 70% of the property owners have to agree to whatever zoning you pick. This is waterfront, river waterfront zoning. There's R1, there's R2, things like, you can't have a dog lot. It's all there in Kenai Peninsula Borough 21, Chapter 21. But, the city's been working with the borough on getting more borough-owned land up for sale. But most that we've discussed with the borough is in the floodway. Exit Glacier Road had several pieces of property, and they're in the floodway, and we worked with Stephanie at the Seward Bear Creek Flood Service area, and we hope near future they will fix Box Canyon, that it won't give way again, and those properties will come out of the floodway, and so then we can recommend that they go up for sale. But, you drive along the highway north of town and you see, I wonder where that road goes, I wonder where that road goes, and a lot of the reasons we hear that we can't put property up for sale, it's too expensive to put a road in. Well, maybe maybe someone in the audience, maybe someone online knows of some property that they could ask the borough to put up for sale. Because, we have to find ways to get more housing in our area. We need more land to develop, and we need to develop the land that we already have. I personally think that lack of housing is the #1 problem facing us. It's facing our community, our schools, and our ability to sustain our great community that we all know and love. Thank you.
Great report, thank you. Do you have any questions for the Borough Assembly representative? Cindy, we so appreciate you, and thank you so much for your report tonight. Other reports and announcements, we have none. Presentations, we have none. Public hearings, we have none. Unfinished business, we have none. Ordinance of introduction, that was on consent. Our resolution was on consent. Now we're down to other new business items. Action memorandum 2022-004. So if you turn to page 44, I don't know if there's a motion to be made at this point. I believe that we'll have administration talk about the action agenda.
Thank you, Madam.
Action memorandum, sorry about that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I do want to provide an explanation of why this is on the agenda. Part of it is, there's a couple things, but part of it is to start the conversation regarding the Hemlock Subdivision. We've been talking internally about almost a chicken and an egg thing with this project, where some action went, and rightfully so, to Planning Commission. It didn't pass there, but my thought was, well, if an action passes at Planning Commission, but then ultimately the project is failed by the council, what happens next? Also, there's an expenditure of funds on this project. And just really wanted to talk about this project overall. And I figure the council will go where you go, and that's perfectly okay, but I really wanted to have a conversation. Also, I knew that this was a lighter meeting and that there was more time for conversation, and we are booked up, for a while for other meetings. But we've been talking about also the importance of developing a process regarding the establishment of a subdivision by the city. This is the first time doing it, and we don't have a process, so we're kind of, feeling our way through in some respects. and really wanted to have the conversation. So that truly is why this is on the agenda.
Okay, let's kick off the discussion then. Go ahead.
I just had a question. Why, do we know why the commission failed, the Planning and Zoning Commission failed?
Madam Mayor, I think it would be appropriate for the Community Development
Yeah,
Director
of
to come
course.
up.
Yep.
Yeah, to answer your question, there was two pieces. There was a replat and a rezone. And so it failed because of there was, I think there was some people with comments there that did not want that to be developed as housing. And then there's another kind of group of comments that helped Planning and Zoning make the decision to turn it down, was that they didn't, if housing was going to go there, there were some things that they did not like about the plan that was put before them in regards to having, like, there was 40 lots of single-family homes. I think there was some people that would have liked to see something like fewer lots with maybe like multifamily housing or some different options within that. So that's kind of the answer. Any other questions on that?
Since that meeting, is this plan that you've put forward did you kind of revise it based on some of those comments? This plan that's presented with this?
On page 47 of the packet.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so this, what you're seeing there is the original when we hired R&M to give up some concepts. They gave us a number of concepts. We brought forth the concept that was single-family housing, just because we were hearing that that was kind of the big, I mean, that's all needed, but that single-family homes is one of the bigger ones. That's why we brought forth that concept. So these concepts were already developed, and those are the ones that Assistant City Manager Sol put in the packet for you to see last meeting.
So I guess I'll jump out and just say, I think this is a larger discussion for the community. I would like us to resurrect all the options and have a work session when we can concentrate more on it as a community. So maybe in September, when folks aren't as busy with summer actions. Part of the beauty of the city, having an RFP, being the ones to look at a piece of property to subdivide and put out to RFP for a developer, is that we can go above and beyond the code. So if we want extra green space, or if we want a lot specific for a park, or if we want additional, sidewalks, amenities, since we are essentially putting out the proposal for the developer, we can go above and beyond and answer some of those concerns that the community might have. And that's hard to get from just, I don't even think these are plats, they're just concepts. So we don't have any plat notes. I know the community is interested in working with our attorneys to make sure, whether it's a plat note or a subdivision agreement, that you can't vacation rental by owner of those homes regardless of what the zoning is, or they have to be owner occupied, exploring some of those options. So that's what I think the community needs to look at a work session. So I know it probably feels like when we hear every day that housing's a problem in Seward, housing's a problem in Seward, I know it's slowing it down for a few months, but this is something that we have to get right, in my opinion. So that's where I'm at. So that at least gets some discussion going. Councilmember Demas.
Okay, so just to kind of play the other side of it, and just point out a couple of things. So we started talking about this, let's see, we first approved the resolution, and this is kind of just to point out the chicken and the egg, and how are we going to deal with this for future projects. My opinion is that each project might be a little bit different and unique, but I think that it would be good to just get it out on the table. If we unanimously have approved over $100,000 to do this project, and then we send it to P&Z to say, should we do this project? So, and I think that's kind of what they were getting. So, I think that there needs to be some sort of formal approval for the project itself to show that council is supporting this project, we want to see it move forward. Maybe we're okay with a work session. I could get behind actually directing to just move this forward tonight, based on the fact that we unanimously have voted several times on moving the project forward already. I do think that there was a little bit of a hiccup bringing it to P&Z, but in my opinion, I've had like 20 to 30 emails on this saying, yes, do this, we need housing, and I've had 2 or 3 people that are very passionate about not having it developed. So I would support a motion to move this forward in some sort of manner. And I would like to have a motion to at least approve the project itself, so we can have that on paper. Would that be supported?
Well, let's keep, since we're, Councilmember Osenko?
I think we need to kind of slow down a little bit. I think public comment is needed and public input is needed. And I wanted to ask administration, we did approve funds for this, but was that also for our idea of putting public works out there? So did that work into that public works being out with the utilities being put into the property out there? Was that part of this whole thing? It wasn't just the Hemlock Subdivision, was it?
So the task orders that are listed in the action memorandum are just specific to Hemlock. I think what you're referring to is the utility expansion master plan, which I guess had some overlap with the water sewer expansion east down Hemlock, but that was like a total project to look at how we can expand utilities throughout city limits to expand residential development.
So I'm not going to make any friends, but I am going to say, I think it's a dangerous precedent to say, council's already appropriated all this money, so then we have to move forward with it. Because on the same side, I've heard, in the past being said, hey, we're just appropriating this money so we know if we're going to make this decision or not. So I think just because we've spent money on something, that to me does not say that is our stamp of approval. Those were definitely things where we were starting to get a concept together, because you can't answer a lot of questions or have discussion unless you have something to examine and discuss. So that's my point of view on the money that we spent to date.
No, you can go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so much thought about this and calls and both sides, but I think the work session after people settle down, early September, would be a good thing. We can once finally hear from people in a setting of a work session where we can band it about. What we would need, that would be with the assurance that we're at least moving forward with something, right? So, I don't know how I'm not sure what motion would be made. I guess what you're saying, just move to have a work session to further discuss the project. That would be what I would back, I think.
Councilman?
So first, I want to thank the administration for the original work that you guys all put into this, and I wanted to thank Liz for bringing it up to administration at our last meeting to look at this again, and that I am for moving forward with this project, whether it's in September or it's today. I think we can really make something happen over there, so just put it out there that I am definitely for moving forward with this.
Councilmember?
Yeah, just a couple things. First off, and not that it's a major thing, I guess, but if we look back at our last meeting, I think we directed the administration to set a work session for this. I don't think we asked an action memorandum like this to come forward. I think we asked for a work session to be set. That being said, I'm not opposed to this project, but I do think we need to pump the brakes a little bit, simply because if you go back and look at the planning and zoning meetings and stuff, the work session they had concerning this, we got a lot of emails that said, yeah, we need it, do it, but we got a lot of people that actually came in physically to comment that said, wait a second. Because I think there was some confusion that what went to planning and zoning was a plan for 40 houses. That's what they had. And I think that's what they thought they had to make a decision on. And so I think we really, we could look at, I think, a work session, maybe deciding whether we can go ahead and replat the property, separate the bike park from the part that we want to look at developing, that kind of thing. Then we can have community discussion on what zoning do we want? Do we want R1, R2, R3, something like that that would maximize all the options for housing. But, there's also some other things going on in the community that could alleviate some of the, shortages and the use of privately owned land also before we give up this piece of city property. So personally, I think we should maybe slow down, have a work session later on, but really get a better idea of the entire community thought on, okay, if we're not going to, get rid of it. The other thing too is if we replat or rezone it, can we conditionally use it as a campground for 3 or 4 or 5 more years until it gets developed, if it doesn't get developed very soon? Because there's still a lot of expense to build a house. And maybe that's not all going to happen right away. So honestly, I'm not in support of moving this forward right now. Those are my thoughts.
Well, we can have some motions move forward.
I'll make a motion to approve the Hemlock Subdivision project and to direct administration to advance the project to completion.
I'll second for discussion, and I have a question. So which concept is your motion pertaining to? Concept 4 that's in the packet?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Can you refer to what page?
That's on page 47. So what would that motion mean to administration?
Based on your clarified question, to move forward then with concept 4.
So what would that mean? Would you then have, you would bring a replat to us? Would you start going through the process for the rezone? Would you check the zoning code on what the development requirements would be? Would you start working on what the RFP would entail? What would that look like?
Part of that also would include the work that R&M is doing regarding the costs for the water sewer for the utilities. So gather that information as well. And then planning and zoning would be also next in that step.
Okay. Go ahead.
Just for clarification, so that if this was approved, we would be sending this to planning and zoning to rezone it R3?
Correct.
Because the zoning says, for concept 4, it says zoning R3 single duplex multifamily residential. Is that all part of the title of R3?
Yeah. It's all allowable.
Those are all allowed uses.
Okay, so the actual zoning is R3.
Correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councilmember Osuna.
So the engineering for the utilities and everything, would that also include any fill that has to be added? Are we talking about estimates of fill, any modification to the lot, to the land, how much it's going to cost?
So that's going to be part of the geotechnical report has not been completed as of yet. So we won't get an estimate for fill or flood mitigation until after that point.
Go ahead.
Did you have another question? Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. I heard that we had multiple concepts. And I think Jason said that, right? But I think I personally have only seen the 2 concepts, the one that was up to 40 homes, right? And I remember Jason had said that it could be less or, but a maximum of 40. And then this concept. I would like to see the other concepts. I mean, I don't know how many, right?
Those were actually in the packet last meeting.
I missed it. Okay.
So the 4 options, option 1 was to do nothing, to leave as it is. Concept 2 was to go with 40 single-family homes. Option 3.
So wait, so this is why, so here's where I'm at. The motion on the floor is to approve concept 4.
Right.
So let's stick to that. So that kind of speaks to my point that I don't think we're ready because we cannot articulate the plan moving forward. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And definitely listening to the discussion, my real intent on this was, do we want to do this project? Personally, concept 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, it does need to be fleshed out. But I just don't, my concern was, again, back to the chicken and egg, again, first time going through it, trying to figure out what our next steps should be. And then, knowing that Planning Commission failed the action, which is fine, do we want to actually continue with the project is what I really want to know.
Councilmember Osinga.
So can I ask why then in the agenda item it says, direct city manager to move forward with the Hemlock Subdivision project as described in R&M Engineering Concept 4? If we're just looking to move forward with the project, not necessarily the 4, but this one says 4.
So that was the recommendation that we brought forward, just based off, like the community development director expressed the feedback that administration received during the PNC meeting, both from commissioners and the public, that there was a desire to go with high-density options.
So, go ahead with the motion on the floor. I'll let Councilmember Cascarano go and then Councilmember Demas. Go ahead.
So with the motion on the floor, just to make sure, the motion on the floor is to direct the city manager exactly what this action memorandum is? Okay, so in the event that I vote yes on this, are we, I guess it goes back to what Mayor Terry, are we just directing administration to keep on putting energy into this, keep on moving forward? What exactly does move forward mean? Does it mean spend more money, or does it mean study how much fill, the flood mitigation, give us numbers for so that we can schedule, even if I approved to move forward, I may scratch concept 4, make an amendment, but if I was to approve something or vote for something, does that still mean that we can also have a work session? Because I don't want to risk voting this down and having everything go away.
Well, there can be subsequent motions. So I'm holding back on my motion. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm considering amending my motion just to approve the project, and with the project approved, it would then go to P&Z with our direction to pick a plan.
So I am concerned that administration, I understand you want cover, you want council cover to know that we are moving forward with the graces of council. I am not, I am totally in support of this project. I think that we need to look at subdivisions. However, that's very broad. There might be something in geotechnical that comes up, and then, we realize, hey, this is not a project that we should pursue. And I don't want it to be said, hey, you've already put $500,000 in this, we're moving forward. We have a motion that says council wants to move forward with this. I think, I don't know that we need that. I don't know, I understand you want council cover, I totally agree with that, but I don't think, I'm not personally at the place where I can say move forward with a project that I don't have all the details for. I am willing to, keep looking at this, and I think it's, helpful, but I guess that's just where I'm at.
Maybe if we get at a point where we get all the geotechnical information back, or we get all that, and we know what it's going to take to make that property viable for a subdivision, and then we can set a work session, and then we can give some very specific direction from that, once we have all that information. That's kind of where I'm at.
Go ahead.
Can I ask what the approximate additional cost for all of that information would be before, to make another decision?
We're not asking for any cost. The
Okay.
geotech is already.
We're just waiting for that information to come back.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, as a second of the motion, and I don't know if...
I seconded.
Oh, okay, well, can somebody tell me the motion, like verbatim,
Yeah.
what is on the floor?
The motion is to approve the Hemlock Subdivision project and direct administration to advance the project to completion.
So I could support what we have in front of us to direct the city manager to move forward with this Hemlock Subdivision project, period. The word approve the project is a little intense, because when we say approve, then it's kind of an open check. I do very strongly support this whole thing, but approving the project, I would ask maybe if we could strike approve and say support.
Well, and go ahead. Honestly, that it is a blank check. Maybe what we need to see before us is a resolution. Well, I guess I'm speaking outside of the motion, so wait.
I'm just going to leave my motion as is.
Yeah. Is there any further discussion? Madam Clerk?
So the motion on the floor is to approve the Hemlock Subdivision project and direct the city manager or administration to advance the project to completion. Bosenga?
No.
Calhoun?
No.
McClure?
No.
Casagranda?
No.
Demas?
Yes.
Wells?
No.
Mayor Terry?
No.
That motion has failed.
So I think what would be helpful in this is getting a cost of, so geotech, do we have a time when that geotech's gonna be returned?
We don't have a date yet.
Okay, so I would put pressure on them for a date. The other thing is maybe get a cost estimate from R&N, because this is not a plat, or a surveyor on finding what a cost estimate for a plat, any plat would be, with the replatting. Utilities, I mean, maybe there's some things that we can map out with costs, and you could bring those costs back towards us, and we could approve a resolution appropriating those costs, which would show support for moving this project forward. And then I'm gonna, I guess I'll go ahead and make a motion. I'd like to see a work session scheduled in September. And then I'll go over what I think should be at that work session, if I get a second.
Second.
So what I'd like to see at that work session is all the concepts. I would like to see, and maybe it's $10,000, and maybe it's not even R&M, but within those concepts, it would be nice to see some conceptual drawings with green spaces and what some of the housing could look like. It would be good to see about what kind of a format for an RFP would be on how it would go out to the developer. It would be great to have attorney opinions on how development specific to vacation rental by owners, and you have to be a resident of Seward, which I think there's some interstate laws that would break, but it would be interesting to see what that would look like. So I guess at that work session, it would be nice to have, I mean, I think the community has some concerns. It would be nice to see ahead of time how we've thought about those concerns and how they could be addressed, and what different options with the density could be.
So could we also get information on how that campground is doing? Up-to-date information on how that campground's doing?
Yeah. I think that's,
It's in the packet.
but it would be good to have it for this year.
Yeah.
Even, yeah.
Yeah, because I think, I don't remember where the numbers came from before, but.
Do we want to make sure, or invite R&M to come back?
Yeah.
For the work session, or be available?
So if there's money that needs to be appropriated for that work session, just to make sure it's very viable, I think that, I think council would support that. I think, if it's not under 30,000 or whatever your spending authority is, to prepare for that work session.
With information.
Yeah, Councilmember?
Would you be open to making it a joint work session with planning and zoning?
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. Is there any objection to me? Actually, the motion belongs to the body now because it has a second.
As long as there's no objection, we can amend it.
To include planning and zoning.
I agree.
Yes, Councilmember.
Is there any way that we could, I don't know rules around this, I mean, the attorney's here, but is there any way that we could make sure that we reach out to local developers? Just because I know with anything the city does, I'm always hesitant for the city to be competing with local business.
So my idea, and that's why it would be great to have an RFP, I don't see the city being the developer. I think what we should do is put an RFP out for developers to bid on, but you're right, we should definitely include local contractors so that when we're developing that RFP, not to tailor it to them, but so that they can have some input. Go ahead.
And then.
That's just, and I'm just one person, so.
If we could, I personally would like to hear from either a developer or another community or somebody that has already done this. So I don't know, I know that's asking a lot, but to hear what I've heard over and over and over, it's like, fine, you can open up the land, you can put it for sale, but finding the person that's going to take that risk could be the trickiest part of it all. So you might be trucking along and this might be easy until you get to the part where somebody actually has to make it come to life. So, if we're gonna get really detailed and everything, I mean, I can help look too, I don't even know where to start, but we can't be the first people ever doing this.
Well, it could also be private people put up a parcel of land and go out to developers. So, I mean, there could be that out there also.
Right.
Yeah. And then part of that work session, I wouldn't mind if we looked at this parcel for the city shop. I mean, when is that work session gonna start?
August 8th.
August 8th. Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Would this be a work session that would require a bigger space, perhaps?
Oh, that's a good
Maybe
idea.
to sit-
Community, library,
Right,
community.
that's what
room.
I'm thinking, once a date is set, we could then, except do we YouTube from there?
Yes, we
We
can.
do now, okay. It's been a while.
Go ahead.
Can we also ensure, I mean, it doesn't have to be a joint work session with PACCAV, but can we make sure that PACCAV is all aware of this? And, I mean, they're a big part of our economy, knowings and when people need stuff, they cry to that commission, so, I don't know. I don't want to make it too complicated, but I do, if we're going to postpone this, to make sure that there's lots of community involvement, so that once September comes, we're ready to say yay or nay, we've beat this horse, let's go. I just want to make sure that everybody is here at the table.
For planning purposes, can we set a date? Just because there's a lot of preparation that's going to have to go into this. To pull all the pieces together.
Why don't we let administration bring back the date to us at the next meeting? Because, and just some input from, I don't want it to be the hour and a half before a meeting. I mean, I want a solid 2-hour block on a different day potentially. I mean, I don't know, not everyone to be terrible, but maybe on a Saturday afternoon, so we make sure that we get a lot of involvement. Yeah. Is there any other comments about that work session? So again, if it's a situation where you're starting to develop that work session and there's some money that needs to be spent. Go ahead.
Just for the record, by planning this work session, we're essentially still directing the city manager to move forward with the Hemlock Subdivision project, correct?
To that extent.
Not really. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You can.
I would say not really, we're just not as limited as that was. So it's a broader approach, and
I
it
mean,
involves a lot more people.
I guess I would say the converse is true. We're not stopping, we're not saying we're not doing the project.
Right.
So I feel more comfortable saying the converse, that we're, we're not saying it's off the table. Thank you. But I could just be articulating for myself. I don't object.
You want to vote on that?
Well, any further comments, any further discussion? Madam Clerk?
By voting on...
Do you want to it's just a
The motion to schedule a joint work session in September with planning and zoning.
regarding the potential Hemlock subdivision. Let's make sure that that information is,
Potential Hemlock subdivision.
yeah, so that it's, people can clue into that topic.
Voting on that motion, Wells,
Yes.
Demas,
Yes.
Casagrande,
Yes.
Calhoun,
Yes.
McClure,
Yes.
Olsega,
Yes.
and Mayor Terry.
Yes.
That motion is approved.
Informational items and reports, we have none. Citizen comments, there is no sign-in for this comment period. Time is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Is there anyone wishing to speak? I see someone standing up and heading towards the podium.
Cool. Dave Paperman, I'm a resident on Oak Street. So I appreciate what you just did and move that towards a public process. When I was in college, my degree was in public affairs, one of my instructors had a great saying, good policy comes from a good process. And we've got to have a process for this, and there really hasn't been right now. I've had many people tell me that I am against any kind of development. I've got my house, and that's all I'm concerned about. That cannot be farther from the truth. I have been struggling in my job because I need people to work, and they're just not there. I know my kid is in school, and the school is in trouble. Housing is, Cindy's right, it is the biggest problem we've got right now. I just want to make sure that the city uses the tools in its toolbox to solve the problem effectively and efficiently. And we've got 1 Forest Acres, and if we're going to use it for a purpose other than what it's being used for now, we really need to plan that well. The one thing I think that you should add to the work session is other large developments in the community. I think that the Air Force Rec Camp needs to be a part of this process discussion. I think that area by the ball fields along Sea Lion, behind where the animal shelter is, and east of the electric building, utility building, I think the lot that is between Diamond and Sea Lion and the Seward Highway is another appropriate spot for development. And I know there's others around the community. I also think that it's best to work on the door to the barn and the lock before we start talking about letting the horses out. That might not be the greatest metaphor. Anyway, I think that talking about the limitations on nightly rentals, I think finding some incentives, disincentives for seasonal rentals. I know in Forest Acres, pretty much 100% of the new development that's happened in Forest Acres in the last several years has been people who have boats in the harbor and build a huge garage with a tiny little apartment right next to it. And I think we can disincentivize that using good public policy. We have the potential to use a homestead exemption, we have tax rates, we have zoning policy that we can create. There's lots of tools in your toolbox, and I think that if we use all of them, we'll come out with a good solution and hopefully find some more housing. I think also working with the borough. The borough has the ability for, 12,000 acres more land they've got coming. And there is land to be developed outside of town. And folks that have the money to build large single-family houses, you can build a lot more, much more effective property outside the city limits. And at the same time, we can build some really nice multi-family properties here. And when I say multi-family, I'm not talking about duplexes and fourplexes. I'm saying that we don't have in Seward any real large housing complexes that are not subsidized. I'm talking like a 20-plex or a 30-plex that has market rates, good management, and effective sound control and things like that, where you can have somebody dip their toe in the water of Seward, decide whether or not they're going to want to live here before they drop $400,000 on a house. And I think we have some new teachers, some other folks that would love to be living in a clean, effective, market rate, large, multifamily facility. And I think including something like that and including other properties around the community will come up with a good solution. So, thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead. Oh, Mary.
Thank you. Mary Tugas, I live inside the city limits. And I just want to say thank you for your support on looking at this to try and be a part of the solution of finding more affordable housing for Seward. I do think that a more public input, even though it slows it down, I think it's needed. But also, you know, I don't know how to say this, though I hear Tom whispering in my ear. Also, there's a faction out there that are a bit of bullies about how they present themselves in public arenas. So please don't let them get at you either. Public process and proper development is what we need, and more housing here. So, thank you.
Thank you.
McDonald, inside city limits. First off, it's not generally government's job to do housing developments. I realize you're not looking the whole way through, but in a relatively hot housing market, which Seward has, even though the right people aren't buying the houses, they're still selling houses like hotcakes. All you have to do is offer the land to the developer and they'll do all this. I don't see any depth of development experience, I don't have that much either, in either administration or council. So I mean, why are you torturing yourselves? Just put it out to a developer. You'll have developers competing for it. The price you get for it, should you decide to sell it for that, would be whatever restrictions you put on it or zoning things, they figure into the price they can pay, how much it's going to cost them. And they know how to figure those costs a whole lot better than anybody else because they've done it a bunch of times. So that's all my advice on that. I realize it's a problem. 60% of the houses are owned by people that are non-residents. They're looking at the houses like a stock. They realize it doesn't matter whether they come up there and stay there in the summers or not. All they have to do is buy it and they'll make money every year, 10 or 15%, better than the stock market because the housing market is hot in Seward. So I don't know that, you can restrict people that buy it, whether that's legal and constitutional. I don't, like me, instead of trying to get a bigger piece of the pie, get a bigger pie. You have thousands of people that are Sewardites in name only. They don't get to vote. They send their kids to our schools. They have to shop at the grocery stores in Seward because they're the only ones there. There's no infrastructure outside city limits. And you're talking about selling the utility that serves them also. So they all depend on the city of Seward or they wouldn't be able to live where they do without our schools, our stores, our utilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all you have to do is make more Sewardites. You have more voters right now. You have from 400 to 650 voters max. You could have from 1,000 to 2,000 voters. with the stroke of a pen. It seems like a no-brainer to me. It's way past time. It would help solve a lot of the problems right there. It would open up a massive amount of real estate for housing right there. So, you know, to me, I don't think it's constitutional. Our attorney is here, and is it constitutional for people that are Sewardites and everything but name, and they can't vote in the city of Seward even though they depend completely on the city of Seward? Are those people not entitled to vote in this town?
That's gonna have to be a rhetorical question.
Hey, that's my question. He's here, he heard it. So, you know, you guys gotta look at whether you're more interested in controlling Seward or you're more interested in what's best for Seward. That's what it comes down to. You know, if you guys actually decide to sell the utility and you don't give a vote of all the ratepayers on anything that happens, I think that'll be a huge travesty right there. So there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, as they say, and I don't think you guys want to get involved in that. You just need to put the opportunities out there instead of trying to do it yourself, even halfway. It's cheaper, and they'd much rather you just get out of the way and let them do it because they're much more experienced. You know, a large percentage of our housing, Seward, is subsidized housing. That was by design starting 25 or 30 years ago. I heard, I don't know whether it's true, that they were shooting for 50% subsidized housing in Seward. It looks like we're probably around 30 right now. There's a lot of different subsidized housing developments around. I don't know what percentage of those people vote. It's probably not enough. So I don't know that that's the answer either. Even if, you know, you're talking about building complexes that aren't subsidized, or one of the speakers did, but they can be bought by people that don't live in Seward also, just a summer home and an investment. That's the way they're looking at it. We're kind of, our problem is too much of a good thing, but I think you need to open up Seward to the people that are really Sewardites and deserve a voice in what happens here. Very much so. Thank you.
Is anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, sir.
Bruce Schaff, outside the city limits, and I really respect what David had said. He presented an argument to you with solutions, with input, understanding of what other options are out there. I wish I could offer that, I can't. But while I was sitting listening to your discussion on this, it occurred to me that you were getting drugged down into something that you probably didn't want to. You know, it was a reasoned discussion and appropriate in some ways, but I agree with Mr. McDonald that I don't believe government's function is actually to create housing, at least in this, not this kind of housing. I did talk, PACAB, you met, Council Grani mentioned PACAB. We did discuss this early in several meetings, and I had counsel with the young Spinella, I can't remember his name right now. And one of the things that he had said is that they had looked at developing property in Seward, that actually looked at the financing, because it's not just the land, it's the whole package. Is it economically viable, and all those other things. And they did look at it. They said one of the obstacles was how they could use the land. If there was land there, were there obstacles to it? That's really the place where government can act. Planning and zoning, or the council administration can help direct the zoning or application of distribution of the land. You own that land. Frankly, I'm not sold on the idea that whole Fort Raymond should be given up. You know, you're adjacent to the generators. You're going to put the electric shop out there. It seems to me that there could be some other things out there. Eventually, Public Works will move from here. That property is prime residential property. Trying to get the airport to DOT to trade the state garage, that's prime residence. The problem, of course, is housing and the urgency of it. And I've heard the expression tonight a couple times from Councilwoman Campbell mentioned pump the brakes. Maybe this Fort Raymond thing, waiting until September, is an appropriate thing. Pump the brakes, let the public weigh in on it again, and see if that's really the kind of development you want. In the meantime, there's going to be other things that show up. I see some things happening in the ground. People are building stuff right now. It won't happen overnight, and this solution is going to take a while. It's not strictly a Seward problem. We probably do better than some places, but it's not strictly a Seward problem, so we're not alone in that. Around the country, this is a problem. Making the opportunity for a private enterprise to do their job. That's what I would encourage you to do.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
Cindy Eklund, Inside City Limits. On the years on planning and zoning for the city of Seward, I think we reviewed the municipal lands management plan twice. On the second time we reviewed it, Assistant City Manager, Mr. Saul, reminded me that we had kind of a funny recommendation, and it was that we recommended that Hemlock Forest Acres Park gets sold with a sound development plan. Now, development, that usually comes to the planning and zoning. Somebody wants to develop some property, they have a plan. We just say, yeah, it's sound. There could be utilities, they don't need to dig their own wells, but then if they get to a hiccup, they come back and they say, we need a variance, or we need a conditional use, or something like that. So you're not gonna find an answer that is gonna be perfect. And that's why the recommendation that went through many public hearings, that municipal lands management plan is 70, 80 pages, something like that.
Longer now.
Longer than that now, they've reformatted it. But I think the recommendation is still in there from the last time it was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And there were many public hearings where people could make comments regarding what to do with the municipal lands. And many of the empty properties were that we sell with sound development, or we sell to, we didn't say to do what with, we didn't say as residential or anything, but as I stated earlier, housing. And so I really think that some residences out there is a better use than the current campground use. Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Council administration comments in response to citizen comments, starting with administration.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank the council for the conversation tonight. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Wells.
Yeah. Thanks to administration for working back on this Hemlock subdivision, and I look forward to hearing more about it and moving forward with it. Thank you.
Councilmember Calhoun.
Yeah, ditto that, but I think, that people probably can understand. I don't think, at least in my mind, that we're looking to be the developers of any property ourselves. I think we're going to do exactly what a couple of people have said, which is figure out the best use for it, sell it to somebody that wants to develop it, and then we'll have it done. Because I've stated many times, it is not government's responsibility to fix the housing shortage. It's our job to make sure that the regulations, the codes, all that stuff makes it viable for a developer to come in and reasonably develop property, and I think that's what we're doing. So, I'm glad everybody had a safe 4th of July. I think all of the Chiefs guys should be commended. I did not hear of any issues in town during the whole 4th of July weekend. I hope there weren't any, but I think everybody had fun, and it was a great weekend, and we finally got some rain we needed, so everybody be safe.
Councilmember Casgrande.
I'd just like to, again, thank administration as well, everybody that showed up. It's really beautiful to watch public process take place and happening, and that we're pumping the brakes. I do appreciate that. I did hear from public comments this evening, annexation several times. I know it's been many years since Vanta was still alive that's been visited. It has never been visited in the 12 years I've been sitting here. So I don't know if that's something that we want to start looking at. I know before my time, so I don't know what happened. There was a lot of issues with people that had built-in floodways and too much responsibility for the city. We didn't want to take on that responsibility by annexing all of that, but I feel like with the Bear Creek Flood Board and a lot of people moving out of those floodways, that maybe it could be time to look at that again. I personally looked into the subsidized housing issue about 3 years ago when the housing issue was glaring in my face, and what I learned, and I don't know because I didn't read it, it's not a fact, but what I was told is after the 1964 earthquake, the subsidized housing was begun to try to re-incentivize people to come back to Seward and live here and get started here. So that was what my understanding was. I don't know, I mean, obviously we can't do anything here, but maybe when administration comes back with our work session for the Forest Acres campground or in the Public Works work session, I do also completely agree with the citizens that have commented that the rec camp, the state shop, and the Public Works building, we're talking about 4 very large parcels of land, and somehow I'd like to make them all comprehensive somewhere along the way. I know we have to break things out and be really strategic and clear on what we're talking about at any given work session, but these are all things that come into consideration when we're talking about opening lands for housing and everything. So, yeah, thank you. Sorry, that was a lot. Thank you. Councilman Lamont.
I want to thank Cindy, our borough rep, for being here and all the work that you do for Seward, and your representation, I think, is really important. And I appreciate all of your comments and just coming here and giving us the report. And I also appreciate your view on the Hemlock Subdivision, and that it has been in the municipal land plan. And that at some point, you just kind of have to give projects off to the professionals and let them do it. And I guess my hesitation with the work session and more public input, even though I think that's super important, is that we're going to be talking about paint colors of these houses. And, I think that at some point, you need to let the engineers come up with the plan, and you need to let community development and our city planner, that's her job to decide what we need in our community, and administration working with the engineers, and kind of let them do it. And I think that projects can be held up. And, I hear all the time from people that Seward's known for doing all these feasibility studies, and then we don't do anything with it. So, I guess I understand pumping the brakes, and I understand getting that input, but I personally feel like I've gotten a lot of input from people for the last 8 months or so on this. So that's why I supported moving forward with auto work session, and I appreciate your comments on that, Cindy. It's been a long time coming, and I still hope that we can move forward swiftly with it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Osenga?
Yeah, thanks, administration. Thank you for all your input. Our borough representative in her report, that was good. Thank you. And to all the people that spoke. Council members, thank you. I think we had a good night, a lot of discussion, but I really think that we can do good things, and things can keep moving forward in a positive way, and be safe out there.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Okay, I echo the thanks to those who showed up and spoke, and to Cindy particularly. I know the job, and it's really fun. It really is. She'll tell you that too, being our assembly rep. We deal with a whole different group of people, and therefore fun. I wanted to give a shout out particularly to the city for how well everything went for the 4th of July. I was up here when that really horrible 4th of July happened back quite a few years ago, and it had the potential of something like that this year, I felt, just with the way people were just getting out. And it was so nice. I was out on a boat watching the fireworks, and I think I told the chief, I saw 2 personal fireworks, just little ones, go up on the beach. Normally there's just tons of stuff, and that was partly the burn ban too, but but just having a handle on it was really good. And I got a lot of, I wanted to give a shout out to the chamber, I guess, but a lot of comments about the family-friendly events that were held, particularly the ones right near our pie sale on Church Street there. Got to see the fish tossing while we were selling a lot of pies. That's something that really brings the hometown feel back, is how Tim and I remember it when we were kids here, I think, except for the grease pole thing. But not the fish tossing, but the kids' things like that. And the cleanup was amazing. I've gotten some calls, people wanted me to thank the city because it was like the next morning you go down and it's all gone and it's all washed and it's all clean, and that's just a shout out to how things were managed here. Also, I'm getting comments about how things are looking better with flowers now, and that whole thing has calmed down a bit. I guess maybe it's because of the flowers and we got a drop of rain. But anyway, I guess that's all I've got to say. It's more focused on the 4th. I'm glad that we're going to kick the can down the road a little bit on this, pump the brakes, whatever you want to say, on the Hemlock, just to set some minds at ease that we've done the full public process in talking this through. And maybe we'll come up with some new ideas in the process, so hopefully. Thanks.
I want to thank administration for starting the budget process and getting us the CIP items. I appreciate having lots of time, and I hope everyone's ready for mini work sessions moving forward. But having this being rolled out this early, again, is that public process piece, so appreciate that. Great job with that. And then also, I think PACAB did a lot of work last year regarding the housing. So I think with this specific work session with the Hemlock Subdivision, maybe there's a larger meeting to be had following, or, then we're in the budget process, but maybe midwinter when everyone's kind of hunkered down, ready to start up meetings again, have a larger housing problem, have a larger meeting about the housing problem. Community development can talk about the steps they've taken with limiting the numbers of vacation rental by owners, and we can see what we've done from our toolbox, and the community can, see the process that we've made and maybe weigh in on some other things that could be done. And for folks outside city limits, I'm sure that the Boundary Commission would entertain any requests for folks outside city limits to request to be annexed by the city. I think that just my recommendation is, there's no reason for us to force people to do anything in this day and age, but definitely if folks outside city limits have any questions or would like to be involved with that process, the clerk can connect them to the Boundary Commission and what that process looks like, and I'm sure everyone on council would be more than happy to entertain that, because we definitely appreciate communities outside our city limits. And with that, I will adjourn at 8:34.